Welcome to the webinar series hosted by the Graduate School of Education's Global Education Office at Kyoto University. I'm Sachi Ando, lecturer at the Global Education Office. Nice to meet you. The Global Education Office has hosted this webinar series with a focus on Japanese-style education. The 2020 theme was Crossing Borders in Japanese Education Toward a Historical and Multidimensional Understanding, and the 2021 theme was Rethinking Japanese-Style Education Through Dialogue with East Asia. This year, under the theme of the future of Japanese-style education in the age of diversity, we focus on the presence of diversity in Japan, such as issues surrounding LGBTQ, gender, ethnicity, language, disabilities, and more. The series seeks to reveal the barriers facing Japanese school education and explore the theory and practice of Japanese-style diversity education. For this third webinar, we have Fumiko Takahashi, project lecturer of College of Arts and Sciences at University of Tokyo. Ms. Takahashi specializes in sociology and sociology of education. She researches issues concerning education and the multi-ethnicity and multiculturalization of society created by immigrants and refugees. The number of children with foreign roots is on the increase, but what kind of educational opportunities are they given or not given in Japan, and how are they involved or not involved in society? I am also personally interested in how Japanese education accepts or excludes children with foreign roots. Today, she will lecture on the theme of the possibilities and challenges of holistic education in Japan from a perspective of educational transfer overseas. If you have any questions or comments for Ms. Takahashi, please write them in the chat. A Q&A session will follow the lecture. Now, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Takahashi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Fumiko Takahashi. I'm a project lecturer at the University of Tokyo. Today, I'm going to be talking about the possibilities and challenges of holistic education in Japan from a perspective of educational transfer overseas. So I'm going to share my screen now. So today, I'd like to talk about some of the projects that I have been involved with related to overseas development of Japanese-style education. Then I would like to present two aspects that are challenges within holistic Japanese-style education. Lastly, I will touch upon the ways in which I can be involved in the practice as a researcher, then take time to hold a discussion session with you all. One thing before the lecture, it would be great if you can make the PowerPoint screen full screen so it's easier for everybody to view. Can everybody see the screen? Yes. Okay. So I think I'd like to explain a bit about a project related to overseas development of Japanese-style education that I was a part of, which connects to how I was offered the opportunity to speak today. I participated in a grant-funded scientific research project led by Professor Ryoko Tsuneyoshi from 2015 to 2018. The title of the project was A Cross-National Study of the Internationalization of 21st Century Japanese-Style Education. Around the same time as the project's launch, Japanese-style education was being partially incorporated into educational systems in Egypt and Singapore. The project attempted to research how such implementations were positioned and contextualized within local educational policies, curriculums, and more by incorporating an international comparison. As written here, we presented at several academic conferences and symposiums. My research mainly focused on international comparisons of school cleaning activities. We presented some of our findings in 2016 under the title Possibilities and Challenges of the Japanese Model as a Model for Internationalization. I'm going to introduce the presentation using some of the materials from it. In this presentation, we talked about the need to be wary of the possibilities and impact of domestic discourse consumption being solely nationalistic in nature. We raised the issue that if the focus is only on the introduction of Japanese holistic education overseas is a good thing, and it is picked up in the media or reported as such in Japan, there's the possibility that Japanese education will be uncritically legitimized using the example of overseas expansion. For example, we discussed the dangers of justifying and encouraging excessive emphasis on cooperation, group-oriented, and assimilationist tendencies as a good thing. We suggested the need to re-examine the purpose of overseas expansion and the need to consider overcoming obstacles existing within Japanese education. We focused on the fact that while there are traditional educational practices that are collectivistic and assimilationist, there are also various new educational practices, such as special activities that emphasize human rights, multicultural society, and individual perspectives while fostering cooperation. We suggested the importance of emphasizing the possibility of these aspects and developing them further. It suggests a way in which we obtain feedback on what aspects are the strengths and weaknesses of Japanese-style education, and to use this feedback as an opportunity to engage in interactive discussions with overseas teachers and educators to potentially create new educational models and practices. For today's presentation, I will largely take the same stance as my 2016 presentation, while expanding a bit further on the challenges that holistic education in Japan faces. The first case study is about teachers responding to a multicultural society. This graph shows the change in the total population and foreign residents in Japan. As you all know, the number of foreign residents is increasing. There was a decrease around the March 11th, 2011 earthquake and tsunami, but since then it has been steadily increasing. Looking at the nationality of these foreign residents, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean are the top three, while there are more Nepalese people in recent years. In terms of the background of this increase in foreign residents, especially after the 70s, in the late 1970s, we saw many Indo-Chinese refugees come to Japan, as well as returnees and their family members from China, and Filipino women who came to work as entertainers. In 1990, with the revision of the Immigration Control and Refugee Recognition Act, it prompted a period in which many Japanese Brazilians and Japanese Peruvians moved to Japan. At the same time, there's an increase in international students, international marriages, and technical interns. Around this time, the poor working conditions of technical intern trainees became a social issue. Recently, the Immigration Control and Refugee Recognition Act was revised again, establishing a new status of residents that expands to laborers in simple labor fields.
Of course, even before this, there was a variety of people living in Japan, such as Zainichi Koreans in Japan. Those who came to Japan in the 70s or 90s or later are sometimes called newcomers, especially in the sociology studies. And those who have lived in Japan since before then are sometimes called oldcomers. Looking at the population of children, in 2019, 1 out of 15 children was a foreign national. It is estimated that the percentage of children from the age of 0 to 9 being foreign nationals will increase to 9.5% in 2030, 14.3% in 2045, and 20.3% in 2065. There are already many foreign national children enrolled in public schools. And looking at this chart, you can see the number is especially increasing in primary school. I will touch upon this more later, but we don't see as much of an increase in junior high or high school here, which are the two graphs on the bottom. So there is a possibility that many foreign national children that attended primary school are not attending junior high or high school. And when thinking about the government's position on the acceptance of foreign nationals, the Japanese government takes a no immigrant integration policy and refuses to use the word immigrant. They use the terms resident aliens or foreign workers, which indicate that the government assumes these people are temporary visitors. However, many of these people end up staying for many more years and not only work but build a family to live in Japan. If we look into the international definition of an immigrant, the United Nations defines it as a person who has changed their country of origin, original residence, especially a person who has changed their country or original residence for more than a year. Applying this definition, we can say that Japan, like many other developed nations, carries a significant population of people who are immigrants. In Europe and the United States, there are categorizations in terms of immigration policies and how immigrants get integrated into society. The right side of this diagram shows the categorization of strategies for society dealing with immigration. The left side of the horizontal axis indicates the policy of maintaining the immigrant's native culture, while the right side indicates the policy of not maintaining it and adapting it to the majority culture. The vertical axis is relationships sought among groups. As you can see, the upward arrow indicates participation in society in the same way as the majority in various aspects, such as economics and politics. The downward arrow indicates that they will build a different economic and political system from the majority, or that they will be inhibited by the economic and political system. So when you look at this diagram, it's difficult for it shows the policy for the immigrants to migrate to the majority's policies or society. However, since Japan does not have an active immigrant integration policy or social integration policy, the current system of accepting immigrants seems lacking. The same thing can be said about education. So as a result, it is difficult to maintain immigrants' native language and culture in the public system. It is also difficult for immigrants to participate in society on the same level as the majority in terms of educational opportunities and achievements. And one example that may show the delay within education in responding to a multicultural society is a problem of foreign student and unenrollment. It is now known that there may be as many as 19,000 foreign national children who do not belong to any educational institution. It can be said that opportunities for compulsory education are not guaranteed to foreign national children. In addition, when we look at the university enrollment rate by nationality, it is particularly low among Vietnamese, Filipinos, Peruvians, and Brazilians between the ages of 19 and 21. This may be due to the fact that Japan's education system does not sufficiently respond to cultural and linguistic diversity. And in international comparisons, Japan's educational system is rated quite low among so-called developed countries in terms of its response to a multicultural society. As shown in the results of the MIPEX Migrant Integration Index conducted by the EU, Japanese education is rated low in terms of social integration for immigrants. So I would like to introduce some comments from interviews studying what Japanese schools are like for immigrant youth. For example, here is a quote from an interview with a second-generation immigrant from Brazil. So second-generation immigrants mean that they have been born in Japan and they have been started preschool and received education in Japan. So I like to read out this quote. So in my mind, I thought that in order to be accepted, I had to be the same as Japanese people. I have curly natural hair, but from the upper grades of elementary school, I started straightening it, and my mind started to change to think that it was okay because I was like everyone else, because I was still a child. So I started thinking that if I dressed like everyone else, listened to the same songs as everyone else, things like that. I wanted to get rid of the foreigner part of me as much as possible. We can see how this person experiences school as an assimilationist space where they feel pressured to erase their foreigner part and become the same as Japanese people. This is from a second-generation immigrant from the Philippines. During high school, I strongly felt that I was not very good at getting along with others, and I would be isolated. I tend to express my opinions clearly and end up standing out in class. Japanese people are very cooperative. They get along very well with everyone. I'm not good at it, and I don't like group activities. But you have to do it at school. It was extremely painful, and when I realized it's not good to say things clearly, I wondered if my Filipino roots had made me this way. So we can see that this experience led the person to think negatively about their own culture and customs, given that they would express their opinion clearly and weren't able to adapt to the atmospheres that prioritizes cooperativeness and group activities. Also looking at teachers, in the current teacher training system, dealing with the multicultural society is not a requirement. Here's a comment from a teacher I interviewed at an evening high school. When I arrived, this teacher had nearly 10 years of experience, but when they started working at an evening high school where 60% of the students were a foreign national, they told us that they felt their previous experience was completely useless. So I'd like to read this quote as well. When I arrived at that school, I was shocked to learn that there were too many students with foreign roots. So I thought that nothing I had done up to that point would be of any use. I didn't even know what
a status of residence was for a child with foreign roots, or what a family stay was. I didn't know anything about their culture, what they had studied before coming to Japan, or anything like that. So it wasn't much about change, but I honestly thought I would start from scratch. So, in general, research suggests that people of generally higher social class tend to become teachers. This leads to many of them uh, facing students who come from very different backgrounds than themselves. There must also be an even greater difference with the student's background and experience in terms of ethnicity. I think this example illustrates how teachers must individually work out solutions without the preparation necessary to instruct students that come from very different cultures and experiences amid a lack of systemic teacher support. Another challenge for Japanese schools is that there are no boundaries within the teacher's workload and that they are becoming busier. Here is an excerpt from a report by the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology that summarizes the results of the OECD's TALIS survey. It is said that Japanese teachers in both primary and junior high schools work the longest hours per week. One of the reasons pointed out is that the teachers spend long hours on guiding after school activities, including sports and cultural clubs. For teachers in Japanese schools, the term guidance is used to refer to all kinds of educational activities within the scope of their work. In the US, the work of teachers is described by the words teach and instruct. But in Japan, the teacher's job includes all kinds of things, including all aspects of life. Uh, each job is referred to as guidance for XX. Holistic education, which includes not only communicating knowledge and cognitive skills, but also non cognitive skills such as after school activities, tokkatsu, and club activities, enables teachers to understand children in a holistic way. However, teachers have had to take on this burden all by themselves, forcing them to work long hours. It has been pointed out that the teaching profession in Japan is extremely stressful because of the recursive nature of teaching, in which they immediately know how their work will be evaluated by the students' reactions, the uncertainty of not knowing what is the right answer, the boundaryless nature of guidance, as just described, and the boundaryless nature of emotional labor. All of this causes a great deal of stress for teachers. I spoke about how schools and teachers are dealing with a multicultural society and how teachers are becoming busier as examples of the challenges that the Japanese holistic education is facing. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, I believe that we must be careful about these issues being developed, maintained, and rolled out overseas without critical examination. In terms of how we as researchers can get involved in practice. First, I believe it is effective to use overseas expansion as an opportunity for teachers and those involved in school education to interact internationally and provide feedback to each other's educational practices. Second, I believe that there is a need to look at holistic education not as a Japanese model, but as a model that has developed in its own way, changing to fit the local context. I believe that it is important not to think there is a correct tokkatsu or an authentic holistic education, but rather to look at each model as a new one that was originally developed in a certain context, such as local culture, educational system, history, religion, and ethnic diversity, and to see how it develops in the local context. For example, there are many different ways to develop Japanese style education overseas, including aid models, national models, corporate models, grassroots exchange models, etc. In particular, I believe that corporate models and grassroots exchange models will play an important role in reflecting local needs. As I'm interested in the things I mentioned today, I am a member of the Global and Multicultural Society Research Institute, a nonprofit research institute established by Professor Tsuneyoshi, who was the project leader of the grant-funded scientific research project. I also continue my research on education of immigrants at universities. I would like to hold international networking opportunities for teachers and study sessions with teachers involved in Tokkatsu under the theme of responding to a multicultural society. I'm currently exploring the possibility of holding these sessions. Uh, that is all in terms of the themes that come out in overseas development of Japanese style education. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to hearing your comments and questions.